Hey guys, welcome back. It's the first day of school. I'm here at UT in Celebration. I'm with the turtles. I mostly came to school because I was concerned about them, but they're doing great. Check them out. Hang on. See? Just like sitting in their little row. So cute. The tower is good too. It's still here. See? Pretty crazy. All right, let's go to class. All right, I'm here. I made it. I'm in the classroom. It's pretty weird. I thought I would come here a little bit more often to work, just to like get out of the house, but there's no one here, and it's kind of freaky. You have to, use your ID to get in, and it's just kind of like, ooh. So I don't know. This may be the only video from UT. We'll see. And let me just make. I have this camera set up where Leela usually sits. Hey, girl. It's also weird to be talking to just an empty classroom. No one's here. So I drew you guys in. All right. So the way this class, Writing Digital Environments, was designed was to begin by talking about our self-representations. So in order to talk about image repair or disaster management or anything like that, first it's really important to understand how we represent ourselves online, how we see ourselves represented. So we began with the Jill Walker-Retberg book, Seeing Ourselves Through Technology, which I really like as an intro to digital studies. And she has a chapter on self-representations, which we read, and she, in there, goes over 3 different kinds of digital self-representations, and they were visual, written, and quantitative. And she begins the visual representation section by going over some of the first selfies, which I think is really cool to see, just as an example of how people have been trying to represent themselves in visual ways for a long time now. If it wasn't through paintings, then it was later through photography, and now we can do it just with our phones that are in our pockets all the time. So we also, within visual representations, I talked about the Selfie City Project by Lev Manovich and his team. And this project collected selfies from different cities around the world. And because of the permissions that you give Instagram, it allowed them to collect all of these images into one website project. And we talked a little bit about the ethics of that. So we talked about that project, then we talked about written representations, and I thought I would pull up my website as an example of a written representation. So along with visual representations such as images, selfies, and so forth, there are written representations, which I use my blog or my website example. And then we also have quantitative representations of ourselves, which we made a whole list on the board that day. But the main things that you might think about are health trackers, so like Fitbits, or apps that log your run, financial data, all of your credit cards, all of that information, location data. There are tons of ways that we see ourselves represented by numbers. And that Selfie City Project is a good example of something that sort of molds both visual and quantitative representations, because all of these images essentially become numbers. And so those are the three main ways that Repberg sees humans as being represented in digital spaces. So I had to go home and do part of this video at home, so that's why the change of scenery, because I was just getting kind of like burnt out at school, but I did like the end at school, so it will go back to that. So it's gonna be a little jarring, but it'll be all right. I'm here with my cat. So cute. Okay, so I'm gonna continue the lecture. Then on February 25th, which feels like years ago, we talked about reputation crises, cancel culture, and call-out culture. And I asked the question, how has the internet changed how we hold people accountable? How has it changed how we shame people, and what's the difference? And this was sort of the question that we talked about that day. I went through some of the terms that I thought were most important around this in sort of differentiating these. So cancel culture, we know, is slightly different from call out culture, is different from public shaming. And I also talked a little bit about public memory and what role this has to play with all of these things. So public memory as the circulation of recollections among members of a given community. So how do we collectively remember? And I think that's really important for call-out culture and cancel culture, and who is forgiven. Within that, we talked about some effects of cancel culture. Are bad people held accountable? Do people lose something? Is it all the time warranted? Is it not? And then I showed you a list of, I don't know what this is, 40 people who had been canceled, all celebrities, and there was some debate as to like who was canceled and who was not, because we all have sort of a different public recollection of these events, if they even were events for us. Like we may not be in a certain circle that even talks about certain people. And then I went through some case studies, Aziz Ansari, Al Franken, and I talked about Monica Lewinsky, who was arguably the first woman to be publicly shamed on the internet, and I talked about how she recovered from that by using the internet, essentially, and sort of has slowly overcome this scandal, which is always called the Lewinsky scandal, but really was the Clinton scandal, right? So that even just calling it the Lewinsky scandal has contributed to the memory of it over time. I talked about Kyle Kashuv, who had a document circulated where he said a bunch of racist stuff, and then Harvard rescinded his application. So these are all examples of people who have been called out, shamed, canceled, and how public memory has dealt with that, how the media has dealt with that, how their audiences have dealt with it, and whether they've recovered. And this was sort of what you addressed in your first project. So image repair is what celebrities and influencers do in response to a scandal. So this is a theory that's been put forth by a communications scholar named William Benoit, who talks about image repair as the way a person responds to improve their image after a crisis, and a crisis being something that can occur with even just one wrong word spoken publicly, a recurring offense, or part of who this person is may just seem simply offensive to a public. And within image repair theory, there are 5 tactics that Benoit has identified as common responses to reputational crises. And it was interesting that in your projects, a lot of you found that these did not necessarily cover all of the ways that your influencers or celebrities were responding to their crises. For instance, a lot of you found that one of the ways that people respond online is by deleting their entire account or not responding. So what kinds of strategies are those? So in image repair theory, we have denial, evasion of responsibility, reducing offensiveness, corrective action, and mortification or apology. And so denial, shifting the blame, evasion of responsibility, saying that, it was an accident or you had good intentions. Reducing offensiveness has a lot of different things. Like you can minimize the act, you can transcend it, you can attack the accuser. This is something that like Trump does that a lot. You can offer compensation. That's something that corporations do a lot. And offering compensation is sort of another type of corrective action, I would argue. So corrective action being something that involves restoring the situation to its prior state. And then apology. We all know apology. And so those are the basic image repair tactics that are used. And then we went through and did some examples of how that was done by different celebrities. So public apology. Apology comes from the Greek speech made in defense. So an apology as a formal defense of an opinion, a position, or an action. In psychology, an effective apology is understood to include an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, to show some remorse, and then to offer some concrete goals for how you will change or how is trust going to be rebuilt. And those work, that sort of scenario works for interpersonal apologies, but when we're talking about public apologies between a celebrity or an influencer and their audience or a politician, public apologies are usually a little bit different because there's more of a negotiation between the accusers and the offender over what constitutes a sufficient or an authentic apology. And so we talked a lot about how this apology spectacle places a lot of pressure on the transgressor to offer another complete statement that expresses guilt or regret and repentance in a way that is accessible to people who were offended. And celebrities who are apologizing, it may not necessarily be because they're sorry, but because they have to respond to or act like they are sorry enough so that the public will accept it. And they don't always. All right, so now that we've spent the first 2 months talking about other people's images and digital personas, now we're going to work on yours. So you all have been sort of thinking about whether you want to work on your LinkedIn or other social media presence, or whether you want to do a website. A few of you suggested doing some sort of digital portfolio, or if you'd like to do some other project that deals somehow with your personal image, digital persona somehow that's related to this class, you can also propose that to me. I mostly just want you guys to do something that will be useful to you. So think about that. Your proposals are going to be due soon. Stay tuned. And that's it for today. Thanks for stopping by and listening and continuing to participate. It's nice to hear from you guys. I'm going to have office hours on Zoom tomorrow from 12 to 2. So I'll send you the code on Canvas or whatever it is. I don't know. I'll look into it. You can just drop in, ask me questions. You can also send me an email. But your project 1.2 is due on Friday at midnight, unless you have any concerns, you're like moving out of the dorms or like, I don't know, something. Just email me, let me know. But otherwise, I'll expect it on Friday. So thanks, you guys. Stay well, and I'll see you next time. I took the office plants home that were in the room that's next to our classroom because I don't want them to die, and I don't know if I'm going to come back here. I probably will, but any case. Here they are. They look pretty good, actually, for being like neglected. But now I have to walk home with them in the rain, so I hope I make it. I hope they make it. Right? Right, guys? They'll be okay.